No, we both have.
Test, test. Test, test.
All right, is everybody ready to begin? All right, I'm going to call this meeting of Saanich Council to order on Monday, March the 7th. We're going to start with the adoption of the minutes. Madam Clerk, please introduce that item for us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item is the 3 sets of minutes for the council meeting of February 22nd, the special council of the 23rd, and special committee of the whole also of February 23rd.
Adoption of the minutes.
Moving second, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. That motion carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, with that, we're going to move on to the public input section of the council agenda. If you'd like to comment on items under C, D, and E under the council agenda, I'm just going to list those for everyone's benefit here. So C1 is the tender for the Gordon Hill Recreation Center heating upgrade. C2 is the Union of BC Municipalities 2016 membership dues. D1 is utility building restitution policy. D2 is the water utility leak adjustments. D3 is the feedback and consultation on the financial plan. And E1 is the municipal support federal ban on microplastics. If you wish to comment on any of those items, please come up with the microphone and state your name and address. And comments in 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is John Schmuck. I live at 1180 Rock Street. I will be commenting on item D3, feedback on consultation of the financial plan. I guess this particular item I'm speaking as chairman of the Saanich Community Association Network. So council did ask Saanich Community Association Network to get its members to provide some input. I think we had limited response there. I know there were a couple that came in. I think there would be a lot of value in the council possibly attending one of our SCAN meetings and going through some of this, and we've come up with some ideas about doing a consultation that might not cost as much money as has been suggested in the budget plan. A workshop would be a great idea. Of course, we'd have to pass it by the members of the network and make sure they all want to do it, but I think that they would. A number of us attended the 2 budget planning meetings that were held there. I kind of regard that as budget 101. So, it's for, I know that during the all candidates debates, anytime the budget process was talked about, we just talked about that we had 20 staff people would attend these meetings and 5 members of the public, and I thought that can't be. But sure enough, that's what it was. There were you folks, there were 20 staff members, and there were 5 members of the public, maybe 6. But we'd be delighted to continue this process. I really enjoyed attending those budget meetings, and I hope that you want to do something. And through SCAN, I would be delighted as chair of SCAN to try to get something going for you. And I applaud you for this setup. I enjoy looking at the councillors, and this is great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. Any other members of the public that wish to speak to those items C, D, and E, please come forward. Calling for a second time, any members of the public that wish to speak? Calling for a third time? All right, thank you, everyone. I'll close the public input period, and we'll move on to item C1, resolutions for adoption. Madam Clerk, would you please introduce that item?
This first item of resolutions for adoption is tender 0616 for the Gordon Hill Recreation Center heating upgrade. The report of the Director of Engineering is recommending that Council award the tender to Apex Steel and Gas Limited in the amount of $1,311,685.
Move the recommendation.
Second.
Move the second. Discussion. We've seen this item come to council a few times in the past. So with that, we'll just call the question on it. All in favor? Opposed? Did you want to ask a question, Councilor Miller?
I was just going to provide a comment, but that's
None opposed, that motion carries unanimously. Still time for a comment, Councilor.
was that?
Still time for a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank staff for, I had asked for additional information with respect to this item in terms of the funding that was provided. The council may recall that the funding that was for this project came with a grant, and I think staff have done a tremendous job in making sure that we can take advantage of that, as well as continuing to pursue grants to cover the fundamental difference in what we originally approved. So I just wanted to offer my thanks to staff for providing that information and for taking the efforts to find additional funding to support it.
All right, thank you.
And that I should say outside of what is funded by Saanich taxpayers.
All right, we'll move next item C2. Madam Clerk, could you please introduce that for us?
Thank you. This next item is the Union of BC Municipalities membership dues. The UBCM is requesting payment of the annual membership dues in the amount of $18,956.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? We'll call the question then. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed? That motion carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, let's move on to item D. Madam Clerk, please introduce that item for us.
This item is the utility billing restitution policy. The recommendation from the Finance Audit and Personnel Standing Committee is recommending the council approve the utility billing restitution policy as outlined in the report of the Director of Finance dated January 26th.
Someone like to move that recommendation?
Move the recommendation.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Sure, Councilor, please go ahead.
There was some discussion on this one, and I'd like to compliment staff in trying to reach a process whereby those who've been overbilled have some redress, and some who are late payers have redress, and the underbilled. And there was some discussion about this in the Finance and Audit Planning Committee, and I think the resolution and proposals in front of you should work well for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed? That motion carries unanimously. All right. Item D2.
This next item is the water utility leak adjustments. Recommendation from the Finance Audit and Personnel Standing Committee is recommending that council approve the proposed amendment to the leak adjustment policy as outlined in the report of the Director of Finance dated January 26th.
Councilor German?
I'll move the recommendation.
Second.
Second discussion.
Once again, there was some discussion on this one, and clearly if there's a leak the resident doesn't know about and there's a need to adjust costing on that, we need a process that can deal with that, and that's what this report and recommendation does. I'd like to thank staff for considering that forward.
Any more discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the motion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. All right. Item D3, Madam Clerk.
Feedback on consultation on the financial plan. The recommendation from the Finance Audit and Personnel Standing Committee is recommending that council convene a special meeting of council for the purpose of discussing how to advance public consultation on the financial plan.
Councilor Brownlow?
Through Mr. Mayor to members, I guess, of staff, I'm kind of curious what kind of special meeting are you looking at? The special meeting with council where we'll take public input at a microphone, workshop with council present, what sort of discussion?
I think I can answer that. The purpose, we had a long discussion at that meeting, went back and forth. I think there was a failed motion and we decided to bring it for all of council. At the point we stand, I call a special meeting of council. But we can have that discussion and include public input as well. Councilor Jordan?
I have a similar question. I think the more we can be in the vein of a workshop where the public is free to kind of have a dialogue rather than just a single presentation, probably be better. Thank you.
Councillor Haynes.
Yeah, I think a workshop is needed, but what we explored at the FAP, the Finance and Audit and Planning Committee, was to get a sense of where was council in its original intent. It was moved by Councillor Derman, and then we had two approaches to it in council, and it still seems that we didn't have a sense of where council was as a collective on it. That was the point of having the workshop.
I will move the recommendation.
Second.
Yeah, thank you. Discussion, Councillor Murdoch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just curious in terms of timing for when the discussion would take place and what kind of, I guess what do we envision as the next steps, and maybe that's what the conversation is going to be. I'm just a little concerned that as we keep coming back to revisit how this process is going to work, I'm counting months and I'm concerned that I'm going to start counting the years. You know, I look back at the staff report from October that came to us on this, and it lays out what is the budget preparation timeline. We're now in the midst of consideration of this year's budget. The work to go into preparing next year's budget will get underway shortly thereafter. And I just want to make sure that we're not going to miss a window again as we further consider what a process might look like. So that's just editorializing on my part.
Would you like to hear from staff?
I would on the question of timing, yes.
Ms. Tinney, can you answer that for us?
Yes, thank you through the Mayor, Councillor Murdoch. Any process, consultation process we would undertake from this point forward would not be able to meet the original timelines in the original report. Two factors in, we're further onto the budget, and also this one was timed to sort of slot in prior to the JD Edwards upgrade process. That is now well underway, so staff availability would be severely limited for the remainder of 2016.
Councillor Haynes, you have a question?
Yeah, and that's much question. I'll just add some reflections that perhaps build on Councillor Murdoch's point. Certainly getting into this year's financial plan is becoming difficult, but as we heard in the discussion at council meetings, there's the general sense is how do we educate the public such that they're more aware of the tools and the process of the budget. And one of the things we looked at the FAB committee is maybe even the structure of last year's budget can be part of that approach, and to start really early such that the public have a sense of the scope and range of the tools that can be applied within the different silos of the budget. The other concern was the cost. How much should be applied to that in sense of cost of educating the public? And thirdly was the timing sense. When can we best do that? How early do we need to start? So given those three things seem to be lacking a clear direction, hence the need to go back to a workshop.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dermott?
Yeah, I think Councillor Haynes and Councillor Murdoch pointed out we really have two things we're looking at. One, how do we provide the public with education, if you would, and information about what is involved in the budget and where we're at today and all those things so that they can come from a place of understanding. And then secondly, a process would allow input, consultative input in the budget before major decisions are essentially made. I don't think we need to, or I don't think maybe we would expect to kind of roll out a complete program all at once. My sense is from a workshop, we might be able to start to discover certain things that we can implement quickly and relatively inexpensive to start the process and then build on it from there. Thank you.
Thank you. We still have the motion. So I'll call the question on that. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, let's move on to item E1.
This next item is the report from Councillor Haynes, recommending that Council support the proposed federal ban on microbeads, and the letters of support be sent to the appropriate ministers, and further the letter be sent to the Capital Regional District, requesting their support in time for the public input period ending March 11th.
Who would like to introduce?
That's the move I'd like to talk first.
Go ahead.
So it seemed to me that, sorry, I move the recommendation. Thank you.
Move in second. Thank you. Go ahead.
So it seemed to me in bringing this forward that with the federal government holding the regulation on materials that go into our wastewater stream and asking for public input, that it was appropriate for municipalities across Canada to speak up. And given the situation here in the CRD with our own initiatives around sewage and conversations around sewage, and the difference between secondary and tertiary treatment, about one would catch microbeads and one wouldn't, that it was quite appropriate for us to raise our voice and join in the public input, the deadline for which is March 11th. So I was very pleased when I raised it with Councillor Murdoch that he agreed to take it to his environmental committee, and I'll let him talk to that process. But what we have is the opportunity to apply source control. In this region, we've effectively applied source control about oils and fats in our sewage and corrected that problem. One of the differences between secondary and tertiary treatment is the material that is captured between the two. And one of the problems in the environment is microbeads, which, as you see here in the report, are these tiny little things from 1 micron to 5 microns in size that are put into a certain range of products, cosmetics, industrial liquids, and also inks and things like that. On the ink side and the stable chemical side, there perhaps is not so much problem. But on the aqueous side, where they wash out into the marine environment, the river environment, the lake environment, then there would be more problems. So this is an opportunity to apply source control and add in our voice to the public to encourage the federal government to apply this into source control by the current regulations that they're proposing, where they would put it into SEPA, subsection 64, SEPA would be appropriate, and I would look to my colleagues for this approval. Thank you.
Councillor Murdoch.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Haynes came to share this with me when he found that it was a subject that the Environment and Natural Areas Committee had been looking at as well, and that it was sort of fortuitous timing, that it was a discussion that we had planned for the February 23rd meeting, just as he was bringing this motion or recommendation to council. So we were quite pleased to have the ongoing discussion at the Environment and Natural Areas Committee. We've been quite interested in the subject of plastics in the marine environment for quite some time, and happen to have a student who's conducting research at the University of Victoria present on the topic, and you'll see in a copy of the minutes from the meeting that she provided us with quite a bit of information about what they're finding in the marine environments and how available these products are, I guess how pervasive they are in the marketplace. One of the interesting bits of information is that the U.S. has taken the step of banning microbeads effective 2017, so that they will no longer be in really cosmetic products primarily. But I think that in that respect, the issue has really gained traction, and hopefully, as Councillor Haynes pointed out, we'll be able to stop the spread of microbeads at the source. But it really is, according to the findings we received or at least the research that was presented to us at the environment meeting, the bioaccumulation that occurs and the way that these beads make their way into the food chain is really quite astonishing. How quickly bioaccumulation occurs as it moves through the food chain, creating all kinds of havoc and really some very unpleasant images to look at. This, of course, microbeads, microplastics in the marine environment are not the only existence of plastics in the environment, but certainly they're one that are exceedingly difficult to control. And so I think this council lending its support to a ban on its use in these products will, and then the ultimate ban going into effect, I think will have a big effect in stopping the spread of microbeads. So thanks to Councillor Haynes for bringing this forward, and I was quite pleased to see the committee join in his recommendation to support the Government of Canada's consideration of a ban.
Thank you. Councillor Brown and Councillor Bryce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank my colleagues for bringing this forward. I think it's really interesting to understand how the federal government works on these concerns. So they have a domestic substance of concern list. There are over 23,000 substances on their list. There are 4,000 priority substances and 50 toxic substances. Substances are identified, and then they have to go through what they call a categorization by the Government of Canada as needing further attention. And so the categorization is really based on environmental, which is potential for persistence, bioaccumulation, and/or toxicity, and human health, which is based on potential to exposure to humans and/or toxicity. It's a really slow process for them to categorize these things and then develop some sort of management strategy. The Canadian government, as my colleagues have said, are proposing a microbeads to add to the list of toxic substances under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. The regulations are looking at banning plastic microbeads from facial cleaners, toothpaste, and other products, and it's currently out there asking the public for input. The ban is for plastic beads that are smaller than 2 millimeters in size, although originally last July they were looking at 5 millimeters. The proposed regulations will forbid the manufacture and importing of personal care products containing microbeads by the end of 2017, and a ban on the sale of such products by the end of 2018. And the U.S. has, as my colleague said, introduced legislation called the Microbead Free Waters Act in 2015, banning plastic microbeads from all personal care products. The CRD has been looking at microbeads for a number of years now as a substance to try and remove through the Courier Wastewater Project. There's been a number of research papers on effectiveness of different types of wastewater treatment. One paper suggests that the bulk of the removals occur at primary, and ultimately both secondary and tertiary are highly more effective in removals. And finally, I just want to say the CRD is involved in a collaborative research project with the Vancouver Island University and UVic, and have recently collected samples, both wastewater, sediment, and Clover Point mussels, for microplastic analyses. The analyses are being done both by Vancouver Island University and the Vancouver Aquarium. The results should tell us in the region what sort of composition and quantity we're seeing at one of our major outfalls. There's no timeline on when we'll finally get the report. But I think a bigger picture for all jurisdictions is that these personal care products and household products are being approved at the federal level. And as appears from the list, over 23,000, they may have significant downstream impacts to the environment. I believe that the federal government needs to have a different lens when evaluating whether products can come into the consumer market, and that lens should be based on their requirement of secondary wastewater treatment. If the chemicals in a product cannot be cleaned up before hitting our water environment, then the producer needs to change the design of the product. So I'm very supportive of this, and I'm looking forward to the CRD's report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank the mover and the seconder, and also Councillor Brownoff for that extensive background material. I guess all I could add would be to say that it is quite remarkable that we as a public, people generally, can be subjected to ingredients in our products, and many of us, for many years, even unaware that they were there. And it's quite insidious, the number of products that these microbeads seem to have found their way into. And I think the public generally has been, for many, many years, unaware. There's been an awareness over the last few years, but to think that through industry, products that we use every day are having aspects of them and parts of them that are plastics would never even have occurred to us probably decade and a half, 2 decades ago. But when did all of this start, and when did we all just start absorbing these in our own bodies, as well as introducing them into the environment? It's really quite stunning when you think of how something like this happened over the years, and people attempting to live healthy lives themselves and be in harmony with the environment. We have all been sort of caught up and been sort of reluctant participants in this this chain of events. So I'm glad that Saanich Council will be lending its support. I'm encouraged the government is already on it, because then it gives us a big chance for success with this. It's not like you have to obviously educate them. Sounds like in a way we're sort of pushing on an open door, which is great. So I'm glad to support it.
Thank you, Councillor German.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will certainly support this motion. It is a step, and an important step. I have a presentation that I've given to some members of the community called The Natural City. And in it, it starts by taking a look at a very small spaceship, a Mercury capsule, actually. I just use the kind of analogy or statement to say, let's say you and I are traveling to Mars in this, and partway along I announce on board and get out a big wrench and tell you I'm going to fiddle around with this spaceship and see what I can do. Well, you would have every reason to be hugely alarmed. And the next slide, well, functionally then, it just, the picture in the back changes, fades in, and it's the fade in of Earth, because we are in fact on spaceship Earth. And microbeads are one symptom of all the things we are doing, where essentially we are degrading the fundamental life support systems of the spaceship we have. And that is not a very bright thing to do. We are at the present time for essentially causing one of the largest mass extinctions of various species that the planet has seen. And we certainly need to change from simply a human point of view of what's good for me or will make my face look 2 years younger or half a day younger, whatever it is, to the fact that our #1 priority has to be to keep the spaceship healthy. That's the most important thing. Because pretty much without that, nothing else counts. So I'm more than happy to support this, and I'd be happy to see Council move any number of motions in this direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mormon.
Thank you, Mayor. I have to admit, until recently, I never knew what the term microbeads. I'd never heard of it before, and I don't know how many in the audience tonight have heard it as a common term. But what I find interesting, and it has been mentioned, all the things that we use, they look good, they taste good, and most of the time we don't really look and know really what's in it. And every once in a while I do glance at the food. It seems to taste very good, and some of the ingredients in it is mind-boggling. Coming back to what we have here tonight, I appreciate it coming forward, and I look forward to supporting it. Thank you.
Councillor Haynes, speak for a second time?
Yeah. I will speak a second time. I wasn't going to, but I appreciate what Councillor Bryce brought forward from the industrial side and some of the changes that are happening. When new technology comes forward, the industrial complex could be like kids in a candy shop. And certainly the idea of using microbeads in facial creams and toothpaste was linked to the idea of silkiness and smoothness of the product. And back in the day, you would find chopped up silk and those kind of products in materials to give them a silky feeling. So also in industrial lubricants and other places, the initial idea was, isn't this wonderful? But as we go forward, we start to see this significant environmental harm that's being caused. So I believe what the federal government is looking for in going to SEPA 64A is to better control the destination and use of these microbeads, because in some uses they are appropriate. It's like all technologies. Even water, too much water in the wrong place is not good. Water in the right place is good. And so, for example, there are some industrial uses and there's some printing uses and ink uses where they would not necessarily get into the aqueous environment. So the point here is not to be like Luddites and cut back on the technology, but to bring an environmental awareness to it. And in fact, the top 7 industrial complexes, including J&J and Procter & Gamble, they're doing a voluntary removal of microbeads, microplastics, from their products. So the industrial complex that is bringing them forward and the government regulatory bodies are moving in concert. And it's really the beads that are 0.1 to 0.5, from 0.1 micrometers to 0.2, as Councillor Brown has said, that are the problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more discussion? I'm also going to support it, and I thank the councillors for bringing it forward. It reminds me of a talk that I heard a number of years ago, where somebody was describing or giving a background on sewage systems going all the way back to Roman times. And I remember the interesting part of the talk was the origin of the word sewage itself. And it came from another term that meant seaward, or to take it to the sea. And this was the great Roman innovation, which was to get all the waste out of the city using water through some kind of duct. And the big sewage system they have in Rome is called the Cloaca Maxima, and it's still there today. And it really is amazing that after 2,000 years, we're just making headway on some of these changes in terms of trying to keep things in the system that may go to the sea in the first place. It's not what you can see that's the problem, it's usually what you can't see. And there's still microfibers and other things that are washed down the drain or our washing machines that need to be caught at some place in the system. And it becomes a challenge of education and practice, and do we do it at